Hey everyone, welcome. Today I'm very happy to reconnect with James Thorne, who is a best-selling horror author, and we covered this in the podcast. So we spoke a lot about the writing and the books and Kindle publishing back then. Now we're taking another twist and actually covering something else. We're going to talk about podcasting. And I think James is overdoing it, actually.
I am.
Yeah, because I heard you have another new podcast. So tell me, how many podcasts are you running right now?
I'm currently running 4, 3 for myself and 1 for a client. So that I don't have to be the face of the 4th one. I'm the producer, I guess is a good way to describe it. So technically 4.
Technically 4. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I have only 1, and it's still, I sort of reduced it from twice a week to once a week to make sure that I don't skip an episode. But how do you manage that? Because I know that you also write books as well. So it's like, I don't know. How are you doing this? I understood that you have the power in your hair. So I will keep growing mine. I won't be chopping it off anymore, just in case.
Your hair looks way better than mine, Ani. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but I have only 1 podcast, so you have to choose.
I don't know, honestly. I jump into a lot of stuff without thinking too much about it. I'm very impulsive, and I don't know how long these will all last. The other thing is that they're all sort of different. They're different in how they're made. They're different in when they're produced. The audience is different. So I think that also makes it interesting for me in that I'm not doing the same thing 4 times or 3 times, which I think I would burn out on that and kind of get bored with it. If it would help, I could kind of give you the rundown on what they are and sort of the purpose for them, and then we could go into more detail.
Sure. I mean, maybe we can start from the very beginning. Like, let's take someone who is considering making a podcast. So I know that, since the audience is different, the topic is different, you basically start from point 0, deciding strategically for yourself what you're going to podcast about and why do you want to have that podcast. So let's start from that stage and go further, if you don't mind.
That's the most critical point. Is you really have to decide what it is you want to accomplish with a podcast. If you don't know what you want out of it, then you probably won't get it. And I was thinking about this last night, knowing we were going to talk today about it. And there's sort of a couple of different ways you could approach building a podcast or even starting a podcast. And the first one is it's sort of a blog replacement. I think as someone who blogged for many years and read blogs for many years, I read very few blogs anymore, and I don't really subscribe to them. It's not because I don't like blogs. I mean, I'm an author. I write words, but the way I consume both entertainment and information has really changed, especially over the past 5 years. And people are wondering why podcasts are coming back and why are they so big right now? And I think part of that is just we've fundamentally changed the way we access information and entertainment. And because of that, blogs have become very ineffective unless you already have a built-in audience and then you create a blog that serves that audience. That can tend to work. And blogs are way more successful in nonfiction spaces than they are for fiction. Because they solve problems, and people are always, they're going to Google a problem. And if you have a blog post that solves that problem, then you're gonna get an audience that way. But all that being said, I think you can do the same thing even better with a podcast, especially if you're solving problems. So if you are in a business where you are you're service oriented, you sort of have a specific problem and you have a specific solution, a podcast is great. Because when people either see your voice or see your face or hear your voice or sometimes both, depending on how you set it up, you start building a trust relationship and people begin to feel like they know you, which they can't get from a blog post. So I would say the first step is to kind of figure out what it is you want. Do you want more clients? Do you want to help more people? Do you want to entertain people? All those questions you want to ask first. And then second, you want to ask, okay, well, is a podcast a great way for me to do this?
Okay. So basically, I mean, did you have any concerns? Like, for example, when I was starting my podcast, when I was thinking about starting a podcast in the very beginning, I was like, oh, it's going to be very tough. It's very technical. I won't be able to do it myself. It's very expensive. I won't really be able to buy all this gear and my accent. So I had at least like these three things that kept me away for quite a long time. And I sort of hopped on that train a bit later than the rest because of that. So what were your concerns, or what people usually think about, which is not true and can be kind of, the myths of the things?
Yeah, well, you definitely nailed it. I mean, the accent wasn't an issue for me, and I think Americans love accents, so I don't think that was a problem for you, even though you thought it was.
Yeah, it was. It appeared to be even better, I guess. Many people sort of, I did a survey recently, and it included 2 questions also among the others, like, what do you like best and most, and what do you like least? So the accent was coming up periodically. They even mentioned some particular words that I pronounce like with a heavier accent and that they like, and stuff like that. So I was amazed at how consistent some responses were. It was really
No, but the technical side and the cost side, there's not no barrier to entry. There is a low barrier to entry, and there are 2 things that that will probably stop people, and they're not as complicated as they think. The first one is they don't know how to do it. Like, they think, do I have to rent studio space? Do I have to buy expensive microphones? Do I have to have all this technical knowledge on how to produce it? And the truth is, you don't. And people are going to care more about. We good?
Oh.
Uh-oh. You still there? Oh no. I think we've lost the host. I'll give her a second here, and if you are watching, I will continue to answer the question and hope Ani comes back. I'm going to give her a second here to see what happens. And I think she's gone.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and answer the question and hope she comes back. So Ani had asked, what were sort of the misconceptions people had about starting a podcast, and what should they be afraid of, or what should they be concerned about, or what do they think they're concerned about? And the first one is the technical piece. People believe that starting a podcast is really complicated or highly technical, and there's some to it, but really what I've been telling people is if you have a smartphone with a basic voice recorder, you have enough gear to make a podcast. Now, it's not going to sound the best. It's, and eventually you're probably going to want to get a dedicated microphone. But even that, there are simple USB microphones you can purchase. The old Blue Snowball is kind of a podcaster standby. But you can add the technical pieces later. But if you even had a phone, and there are walking podcasts now. People are doing podcasts while they walk, and they're recording on their phone. So you can use I think Smart Voice Recorder for Android. I don't have an iPhone, but I think Smart Voice Recorder for Android will get that job done. And then you have a file, and you don't have to even do any highly technical editing or anything. If you have the file from the device, you can then take that file and make it an episode of a podcast. Which brings me to the second one. The second misconception was it's expensive. There are, I use Libsyn, Libsyn. It is a podcast distribution platform. It was the first one, I believe, came out in the 90s. And basically what Libsyn does is it sends your it sends your file out to places like iTunes, Stitcher. If you think of all the places where you get where you can subscribe to podcasts, Libsyn is the distribution network. You can pay, I think the minimum package is like $5 a month, I think, something like that. And it's not, you don't get, and they charge you based on the megabytes that you upload. So the $5 a month plan, you're looking at maybe an hour or less worth of podcasting time in MP3 format. But the point is, for $5 a month, you can try it out. And what it does is you upload your MP3 file, you put in, your description, your whatever, all your metadata that you want associated with it, like description and topic and title and all that kind of stuff. And then Libsyn then pushes that out, and it publishes like a blog post. So you can set it to go at a certain time and a certain day. And then you don't have to worry, like you don't have to go to iTunes and then go to Stitcher and then go to Player FM. Like Libsyn will distribute to those. And there's a little setup for that, but there are some walkthroughs online, some simple text-based tutorials. It's not difficult. Basically, if you can post a blog post, you can also do a podcast episode. So those are really the two things that people have the most misconceptions about, and that are not really not that difficult to fix. In other words, if you kind of get in there and try it out, you'll see. Now, if you want to go a step further, with Libsyn, they have you can upgrade the package. So if you're going to need more time, so if you're going to do more episodes per month, they bill you per month. You can upgrade, and then you get more bandwidth or more data. And all of this is independent. It's not dependent on how many downloads you get. So if your podcast explodes and you get 1 million listens, you don't get charged anymore from Libsyn. It's not like a mailing list service where you're charged based on the number of people you're serving. You pay that flat monthly fee based on, what you're uploading, and that's pretty much it. And then, as you get up, you get more analytics packages. You can see how many people are listening to it, that sort of thing. And then on the microphone side, I mentioned Blue Snowball. There's a bunch of USB microphones that you can purchase, and those are relatively cheap, and they're kind of plug and play. So you put the USB in there, you plug it in, and you're good. You're back.
Okay, it seems like I'm back. Yeah. I think it's today something happens with our internet connection. I have no idea what's going on, but it periodically kind of goes away and comes back, and I don't know what's happening. And it's a fiber optic, so it should be quite stable, and it has been up to now. But yeah, Murphy's Law,
Well, you know what, I went ahead and answered your question about microphones and is it expensive, and I just kept going. So
okay, good. Because I wasn't sure that you stayed there. I thought I wasn't sure. Okay, good. So we have some people joining us. So welcome, Nazim. Nazim is a really good friend of mine I've met on Blab. Elaine and Sandra are here too, so welcome. If you have any questions, you can either come and take a seat, or you can type /Q and the question, and we will definitely address that. Anything related to podcasting and even writing, because James is really good at it. He's on the dark side, though. He's writing horror, but still he does it well. So just go ahead. Don't worry about that. Yeah, Nazim, do you want to join us? If you want, just I haven't locked the seat, so it's open. Okay, so I hope you said that the equipment is not a big deal. I mean, I had an issue with equipment because when I launched my podcast, I was living in Armenia, and there the microphones were very expensive. I mean, everything connected to technical and equipment was very expensive. So I had to buy it, not even on Amazon, because Amazon didn't deliver to our country. I had to buy it on eBay and wait for about 3 weeks until it was delivered. And since I was a very impatient person, I was like, no way, I'm not waiting for 3 weeks for the microphone to arrive. So I launched my podcast in 3 weeks. I was watching tutorials and I was recording interviews parallel to each other. And I was using just the earbuds to do that until the mic came. So no one complained about the audio quality, which is sort of, you can even start like that if you really want to bootstrap. But altogether, it cost me about $100 to start it, because, I just bought the microphone. It was delivered, so it was, a bit more expensive than usually it would be. Plus the hosting of, I don't know what it was back then, about $10 or $15 per month.
Oh no, we're lost. We're losing her. Oh no, we're losing you again. Oh no. I think she's gone. Oh no. Well, if I knew how to add people, I could add you guys, but I don't know how to do that. Someone wants to, this is my first time on Blab. If someone wants to drop a question in the chat on like how to add someone, if you want in, I'd be happy to do that. I'd bring you in. Oh, I get someone calling in. Okay, what's this? Let's see here. All right, I'm gonna accept somebody.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
I just jumped in because I got a meeting in a couple of minutes here in the office, but I saw that all of a sudden we lost Danny, so I said, let me at least give a hand here.
Well, thanks.
Nice meeting you. Podcasting, a way to I got the title and I was like, wow, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah. Questions? I don't.
I had a question for you. I was going to type it on the side.
Yep.
The ideal length for a podcast. That's it. I was always wondering about that. We haven't started podcasting. Me and my wife have this Italian lifestyle blog and site, and we were always thinking of doing stuff related to Italy. But I was always wondering what the ideal time-wise is. An hour, 45 minutes, or is it?
That's a great question, and it's highly subjective. I'll give you my perspective on it right now.
Okay.
And this is an American perspective too. The average American commute is about 20 to 25 minutes.
Okay.
And what I've heard from people, and what I've seen some analytics is that people would rather listen to 2 different episodes, one in the morning and one on their evening commute, as opposed to break one up and listen to half in the morning and half on the way home. I don't know, for whatever that's worth, that seems to be the way people think. They would like to get in the car and be done with something when they arrive at work or when they get home.
Gotcha.
So I would, my task I put out, I'm trying to keep my episodes 15 minutes or less. And I think, as far as people who are listening while they're commuting, while they're doing laundry or making dinner, 15 minutes is it's enough time that you feel like you get a little dose of entertainment, but it's not a high level commitment.
Gotcha. Great. Annie, you're back. So I'm
sorry. It's so annoying.
I don't know
what's happening to this service. I have no idea.
I'll toss the show back to you.
No, it's okay. You can stay. It's fine.
No, I have a meeting in like 10 minutes, so I got to get ready.
Oh, okay, then that's another.
Thank you very much for answering, and great meeting you.
Likewise. I can't tell when I don't know, like when someone's calling in. I somehow randomly added him to the conversation.
Well, I made you a co-host just for that. So if I disappear, okay. Usually I don't disappear like this, but since the morning, I realized that something is really fishy here. I just made you a co-host. So in case something happens, you can carry on and you can also have people come in. So yours were quite short. Okay. Mine are much longer. I'm doing interview-based shows, and mine are about, I don't know, everyone is saying me, did you decide that it's going to be 40 minutes and that's it, and you check the time? I usually don't, but my experience, like, you know, it seems like it takes me around 40 minutes to do a full-length interview. And that's, I never check the time, but at the end, I end up with interviews between 35 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So I guess that's just, you know, and since my listeners seem to commute much further to work and back, it seems to be okay because they travel about 1 hour.
Yep.
And also they listen to me when they are jogging. So this time seems to be okay. Although it all depends on the content because, you know, I mean, I listen to podcasts much less these days than I used to. And I've realized that the time doesn't matter. What matters is the content and who you are talking to, because sometimes it happens. I even ended up not airing some of those interviews, but sometimes you end up with a boring guest. And when the guest is boring, even 10 or 15 minutes is too much. So 40 minutes is like, you know, no way I'm going to torture my listeners by, you know, making them.
I think there's a good distinction between long form and short form podcasts and whether or not you're having guests. You could not do an interview and be done in 15 minutes. That's not realistic. If you're doing an episode or a show where you don't have a guest, then you can kind of decide. And like when we do, I do the Horror Writers podcast with Zach Bohannon, and when we record just the two of us, we both keep a timer on our desktop, and we set it for like 20 minutes. And almost every time we do that, the conversation sort of naturally hits a wall right around 20 minutes. And it doesn't mean we automatically stop at 20, but that's sort of our indicator, like, okay, that's probably about the right length. Now, when we have a guest on the Horror Writers podcast, we probably go twice that. We probably end up going, 35 to 40 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. It all depends. And it depends on two things, actually, I think. It depends on your audience. Because, if you specifically target people who are who prefer shorter pieces, then you just go with the shorter pieces. If you have people who need to fill up that 1 hour while they are driving, most probably longer thing will work for them too. So it depends. So we have a question which says, what do you both discuss on your podcast? So you have 4, so you can start. Mine is short.
I'll talk about 3 since one's a client project. The 3 that I both co-host and produce. The first one is the Horror Writers podcast, and I started that a couple years ago. And that was originally intended to be a writer self-publishing podcast for writers of horror and dark fantasy. And I started out,
which is very niche, actually, right?
Yeah. And I started it by myself, and then I brought on co-host Richard Brown, and then Zach and I rebooted the show, and now it's more for fans of just horror in general. And so we talk about books and movies and television shows, but it's not a writer's podcast. The second one I do is called Dark Arts Theater, and that's a little more artistic. It's for fans of horror and heavy metal. And I do interviews, I do music videos, and I do seasons of that. So I'll do big bunches at a time, and then I'll go months without an episode. The Horror Writers podcast is weekly. And then the third one that I just started is called The Intronaut, and that is a short form podcast for introverts. And that just launched like last week. And it's just me kind of riffing a little bit about life as an introvert and coping strategies. And I've been asking people to send me in submissions. And we got Bettina up today. She sent in a submission about what it's like to live as an introvert. So that one's brand new. So they're 3 very different audiences, as you can tell. There's some overlap here and there.
I still haven't discovered what I am. Am I an introvert or extrovert? Because I sort of, it depends. I mean, I seem to be extrovert, but I feel more like introvert sometimes, especially at times when I think that people are stupid and I hate people and I don't really want to deal with them. So it all depends. I mean, I guess it's just, I mean, I'm okay and I love communicating and talking with people and meeting them, but it all depends who they are. So I'm very selective. So as for extroverts, I guess they are like that all the time and everywhere. I'm more like, it depends who does, I may be very, very fun to be with, but, if I end up with some people who are not exactly the type of people I would like to deal with, then, I immediately become an introvert in that case, I guess. Yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah, interesting. I mean, yeah, very interesting. In 3 podcasts, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I could make it. But anyway.
Well, yeah, go ahead. I just want to apologize. Like, I'm not used to Blab, so there's like all this stuff happening outside of. There's like these questions and there's a live chat, and so I'm not ignoring you. I have no idea what's going on. I'm gonna let Annie throw me questions so that I don't mess it up. So.
I'll do that. You'll get used to that. No problem.
All right, good. So let's hear about your podcast. Tell us what you talk about.
Okay. Well, my podcast was created like over a year and a half ago, and it was basically a podcast for newbie writers who want to become authors. So what we're doing is usually they are getting like 2 parts of a thing. One is the emotional part, which is encouragement and emotional support and inspirational stuff, so they can sort of, not to give up writing, to keep on carrying and discussing all this stuff. And I usually put myself into a solo piece, telling about my own struggles, telling about things I've overcome and stuff like that, so they can really, since most of the writers are introverts and they don't discuss their struggles, they may think that they are the only ones. And I'm like out there showing that, no, you're not the only ones. Everyone's writing is kind of, a challenge. And the other part is like the more practical knowledge part, where I'm interviewing people from the self-publishing industry. I'm interviewing writers. Right. We are discussing book marketing, self-publishing. I even touch points about social media, about different writer platforms, and anything that can help writers become successful authors. So anything that can be related in any way, in some way, then, we cover that to make sure that they get something out of it. So that's it. We have another question, but it should be /Q without the quote marks, or how do you call those? Quote marks?
Quote. Yeah, you got it.
Quotes? Okay.
It's close enough.
Yeah, close enough. It's okay for non-English speaker. You're fine.
Doing great.
Okay.
You're doing way better than I would do in Armenian.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Okay. Very good question, actually. How do we find audience? And it's interesting because I had a separate podcast episode about how to use podcasts to gain audience for your books. So now we're going to talk about how to gain audience for your podcast. So go ahead. How are you dealing with that one?
Yeah, that's a really complicated question. I think it goes back to where we started, which is, what is your purpose for starting the podcast? If you are looking for an audience, that's different than if you want to serve an audience. So if you already have a product or a service and you want to better reach those people, I think that's different than sort of like, okay, I want to find an audience and I don't necessarily know, who it is or what they're doing. I think it's got to come from what you're passionate about or what you really enjoy or who you are. And hopefully that's in alignment with whatever product or service you might be selling if that's what you're doing. So in my case, the Horror Writers Podcast is, it's now in Dark Arts Theater as well. It's all about horror, dark fantasy, movies, television, and I write horror and dark fantasy books. So it's and I'm not selling my books on the show. Zach and I don't don't really talk a lot about our own stuff. What we're hoping is that we're building a relationship. We're finding an audience through that who will then be curious about, okay, I kind of like these guys. Maybe I want to check out their books. So it's not a direct causation. It's not a straight A to B marketing play, which is why you really have to be into it and really passionate about it. Because if you're doing it just to build an audience or just to sell a product, you're going to kind of run out of steam.
Oh yeah, that's true. Especially if you are checking your stats, and in the very beginning, they don't really feel very, they don't look very exciting. You end up looking at this curve, and it's not growing, and it's not going up, and you're like, am I talking to myself here? What's going on? And so yeah. I mean, with me, actually, what happened was the opposite. I started from scratch. I worked in corporate before, so I wasn't really into this online stuff. At some point, I was blogging about completely different things. I was a self-development blogger, so that the audience kind of, had nothing to do with my podcast. So when I actually launched my podcast, I started from scratch. I had no audience. I had zero email list. My website URL was a completely new domain that I bought. So it was like, everything was from scratch. And I think what gave me the initial push and helped me a lot was when my podcast was featured in New and Noteworthy on iTunes. It became very visible, and it stayed there for quite a long time. I think it usually stays up to 8 weeks. So that's the approximate. I mean, it got there very fast, like in the first week, I think, and it stays there about 8 weeks. So it was very visible. People were, who were searching for podcasts, people who were going to iTunes homepage were seeing it all the time. And I think that kind of helped a lot. So those who were interested in the subject were checking it out. And those who were subscribing kept with me. And I guess that was my initial audience I worked and built it up to. So later on, what happened, with each interview, you end up, someone from their audience checking your podcast. So some of them may stay if they are, interested in the subject. Many people who are interested in the person you interviewed may just listen to that one and go away and never come back. So that happens too. But basically, I guess what I did was, I was very precise about what my audience wanted and made sure that the content was exactly about that. And when you end up providing consistent content about that specific subject over and over again, then, people stick with that, because if that group is interested in that subject, and if they need advice, and if they need help, and if you are providing it all the time, they just, they keep subscribed, they keep listening to the thing. So I guess that was the main thing. And then later on, the word of mouth played a big role as well, because when I'm following, I'm looking at my Twitter account or at different, the Facebook timelines and things like that, I get mentioned when people are asking about, podcast for writers or a podcast about self-publishing. And also what worked well also, although I didn't know that, so I didn't do it on purpose, but it worked. Many people, I recently did a survey, as I mentioned, and many people found me and my podcast by searching self-publishing or writing or book marketing in iTunes. And then, since it was those phrases were included in the description of the podcast came in the search results. So that was another way to sort of, I hate SEO, and I'm not doing that ever on purpose, but this time, this is how the effect I've got from it.
Well, it's a really good point, and I've not been very good at it. I'm like to think I'm getting better, but you mentioned all of what you're talking about. All of what you just talked about is really not only about finding an audience, but it's also being very clear on what you're delivering. And for example, Dark Arts Theater, which I love, I did a terrible job at branding that. And like, if I say Dark Arts Theater, you don't know what that really means. And I'm sticking with it now because like I'm in too deep, and I'm not going to change the name of it. But when I launched this new podcast, I called it the Intronaut, a podcast for introverts. So I said, this is exactly what it is. And you can coy and you can be cute and you can be punny and you can do all that kind of stuff with a title and your branding and your description. But people aren't going to spend the time to figure it out. And now, like, I'm very conscious, especially with the Intronaut, like I have introvert in everything, in titles, in meta descriptions, in keywords. I'm talking about stuff introverts care about. Like, everything is aligned, from the name to the imagery to the content, and that in turn builds an organic audience. So it's all related, I guess, is what I'm saying. And that if you're very clear on what you're delivering without trying to be cute or quirky, I think it works.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just put your photo on the thing, but then, you would confuse people because, they won't know whether it's a heavy metal stuff or whether it's a horror stuff, whether, there are so many other options out there. So,
Well, I've heard some of the Intronaut's only been up for a week, and I've already heard from a lot of people who, particularly women, who said they really like it because it's not stereotypical. And I didn't know this because this introvert extrovert stuff is really just starting to come into mainstream consciousness now, even though it's been around since for almost 100 years. But what people are saying is, like, the stereotypical introvert is a woman. And they're like, oh, a guy hosting a podcast for introverts is different. And I didn't even know that. So I guess in a way I kind of stumbled onto something.
So you know what's going to happen to you? I mean, I guess it's going to be the opposite of what happened to me, because I have a feeling that around 90% of my listeners are men. So you will end up with women at the end.
I'm okay with that. All the most important people in my life are women. So I'm okay with that too. I sort of, it's really nice. No problem with that. Yeah. So it's fine. Okay, so so basically, all three were solo, or you were doing interview also? Well, I all three started out as solo. The Horror Writers podcast, then I brought on a co-host, and now with a second co-host, and when we do interviews. Dark Arts Theater, which is in its second season, I'm releasing the second season now. That's almost entirely interview based, so it's just me with a guest each episode. And the Intronaut is sort of like these NPR style, like 10-minute monologue type of things that are topic based. But I've also engaged the audience and asked them, and these are introverts, so this is a big ask, but I said if they wanted to send me a recording about their life as an introvert, I'll put it on the show. And
my God, that's scary.
It is, but I've already gotten like 6 or 7 submissions in the first week. So, and people are saying, like, I don't know if I can do this. And, this was really hard, but I wanted to do it. And so it's very cool. I've got 2 on the show. Like I said, I got Bettina on today. I had Jim Heskett on in the first batch, and I have more lined up. So it's right now the Intronaut is just me, but that could change as I move forward too.
Wow, interesting. Well, actually, that leads me to the other point. I don't know if you had the same experience, but I have the experience that actually creating engaged audience through podcast is so much easier than by blogging or, I guess the closest thing is the live stream because they also see you. But basically, written word doesn't actually get there so much.
Yeah.
So, it's...
It definitely is. And two of the shows that I've sort of been watching from the very beginning and people who I admire are the self-publishing podcast guys, David, Johnny and Sean, and then Joanna.
I love them, but I can't listen to them. It's very hard to follow. They are like a bit of everywhere, and they are jumping from one place to another. It's very hard to follow. When you are watching their hangout, like the video version, right, then it's easier. But if you're just listening to that, it's very hard.
Definitely. And so those guys and Joanna Penn with the Creative Penn, those are 2 podcasts that have been around for a long time. And I felt like before I knew them personally, I felt like I did. just from listening or watching their podcast. Okay. And
yeah.
I think that's an important component. Like you said, you don't necessarily get that from a blog. If you're reading someone's blog, and yeah, it might be entertaining, it might solve your problem, but there's something about seeing a face or hearing the voice that's just different. And it's sort of this instinctually human interaction one way, but it's still an interaction. But it's so much different than just reading the words on a page. So I think if nothing else, if you even have a small audience and you want to deepen your relationship with that audience and deepen engagement, I think a podcast is a great way to do that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I really like the effect you're having. It's kind of completely different. Although I'm doing more interviews, like definitely I'm doing much more interviews than solo pieces. But even during the interview, you end up revealing yourself, whether you want it or not. You sort of, depending on what subjects you're touching, you end up kind of sharing your opinion about the thing too, periodically. So of course, like, the person you're interviewing talks more than you do, but there is this, I don't know. I mean, how are you dealing with interviews? Do you prepare like questions in advance, or, how are you? I mean, because I'm so bad at preparing things in advance. I never do that. And I'm so unorganized, like, I don't know. I mean, back in Armenia, when I'm kind of recalling my processes, I've been interviewing and recording podcasts pretty much everywhere, like in the living room, in the bedroom, wherever it was, whatever I felt like it. And it was very unorganized, and I was like, oh my god, I have an interview in 10 minutes. I was getting a reminder, and then I was picking up stuff and going wherever it was free. And I never prepared questions, but on purpose, not because I didn't have time, but because I think that the free flow is better. So I just, it would be too predictable for me and less fun for me if I knew what I was going to ask. And if the person I have many requests, like, are you going to send me the questions in advance so I can prepare? Now, like, no way, I'm not doing that, because otherwise it won't be so much fun. So are you doing that as well?
I think I have the same approach as you do, and it's a stylistic choice. There's not a right or wrong here. I've done interviews where people have sent me questions ahead of time, and it's been great. And I've done other interviews where I just show up and talk, and that's great too. Me personally, as a host, I do my homework on my guests. I look at their stuff. I read their books. I listen to their music. I watch their movies, whatever it happens to be. But I don't necessarily prepare sort of a standardized list. And then there are some guests that are sort of in the middle. So I'll give you one example. On an upcoming episode of Dark Arts Theater, I'm interviewing Eduardo Sanchez, who was the director of the Blair Witch Project. And he's done a bunch of other films, and I wanted to ask him specifically about that movie and certain elements of that movie. So of course I had those questions sort of set aside. I'm like, I definitely want to ask these, but even outside of that, like I kind of wanted to let the conversation flow. And a lot of times too, I want to be subservient to my guests, and I want to let them sort of share what they want to share. And I know that depending on what they have going on, they might just want to show up and talk about their newest thing, or they might have a new book out or whatever. And I don't want to dominate the conversation with my questions. So I tend to be more organic and more conversational, given the fact that I kind of do my homework on people.
Okay, yeah. But then I just recalled several emails I was getting, like, from the other extreme. You have these people who are usually providing services like getting a person to be interviewed and introducing the person and representing him and stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, I don't like that approach so much, to be honest. But that put aside, when they are writing you emails, besides the fact that they are copying and pasting their template to, you feel that it's a template, but even like that, what they do is like, okay, this is this and this in person, and we would like to be interviewed, and she's, they don't even tell that, she will be a good fit for your audience, or, that anything. It doesn't matter. It's just she needs to be on a podcast. That she's my client. I need to put her somewhere because I promised 10 interviews. She has to get 10 interviews. And what happens usually is, and this is the list of questions you're supposed to ask her. And I'm like, huh? What's going on? As far as I know, it's my show. What's happening here? So it's really kind of, I don't know. I mean, I'm very flexible. I'm fine with the free flow and with conversation. I'm okay with people sharing their new things and new books and talking about different stuff, but I'm not okay about being told what to ask and what to do. So there is a limit.
Yeah, I haven't had that experience yet. I've been fortunate enough with all of my interviewees to be able to correspond with them directly. I haven't had to deal with anyone's people yet, people in quotes.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would imagine that would be a somewhat awkward and uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even do like the basic research.
Mm.
They don't even see that I've already interviewed that person, first of all. Like,
nice.
This person has been on my interview. Once even they went too far, I was like really furious. I connected with the person they were representing and saying, I don't care how much you're paying. It's too much because the person told me I want to represent her, etc. And I told her, she's been on my podcast and she's a very good friend of mine, so I'm in touch with her. And then she tells me, yes, but if you would like to interview her again, please get in touch with me. And I'm like, again, she's my friend. I can write her that. So it's like really awkward kind of stuff happens there. And it's just, from it's very difficult when people are not into this and they don't realize what they are getting. It's very difficult to actually sort of, evaluate what they are getting for this service. But personally, I think that it's always so much better when you're the one connecting with your listeners, with your interviewee, because it basically gives you two things. First of all, you create the relationship which you want to keep. I mean, for the podcast, we talk about audience, but besides the relationship with our audience, we also create amazing relationships with our guests.
Yes.
And I personally love keeping in touch with them later on. Mm-hmm. And it's very important for me. So I don't really sort of, I think it's all about kind of, getting personal on stuff. So if I'm hiring someone to do that part I'm okay with hiring a formatter, a book cover designer. I'm okay with hiring a person who will maybe manage my calendar or, stuff like that, which don't really make any difference about who I am and what I do, because it's stuff that needs to be done and it's fine to be done with someone else, by someone else. It's okay. It's even pleasant thing to get rid of those. But there are certain things that I still believe, just like, if the author, when he's doing his PR, at the end, he has to show up, right?
Yeah.
I think he has also to sort of, maybe kind of, decide whom to approach and how, and to get a bit personal about the thing, because copying and pasting a template, I don't know.
So what have we not hit on as far as podcasting goes? I'm just glancing around me at all the activity outside of this video window, and I'm wondering if we missed anything really major or something people were asking for.
You have to drop in a chat the link to your podcasts, because it was asked and I did that. So you have to write that for next school.
Okay. All of them.
All of them, yeah. Give them a choice.
All right, here we go. I'm going to go in right now. Luckily, my URLs are pretty concise.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do.
we go.
Okay, so we have that too. What didn't we cover? We covered the equipment. We covered the important decisions. Let's talk about customer avatar. How are you actually approaching that? I mean, we briefly covered that, we have to decide for ourselves who we are talking to and, based on that, kind of create the content. So do you, so now you have 3 different avatars you're dealing with, right?
Yeah, maybe 2.5.
So how much in details are you going to, imagining who those are?
Well, with the Horror Writers Podcast and Dark Arts Theater, those archetypes are really the same as my readership. So in a way, I'm just kind of looking for different ways to serve an existing audience, which I don't think that's going to happen as often as the other way, which is what I did with the Intronaut. So that one, I sort of identified a customer archetype based on who I was, and that's hitting a whole new market. So I have no belief that anyone who listens to the Intronaut is going to go buy my dark fantasy novel. Like, there's not really a connection there, and that's not why I'm doing it. The Intronaut is really there to help people and to help people who have the same sort of issues that I do. So I decided, okay, I know I'm an introvert. I've lived, most of my life this way, and I know that there are a lot of other people who have these same issues. So in that case, it was kind of easy. I just sort of thought of myself and what would I want to get out of a podcast for introverts, and that's what I'm delivering. And I think it goes back again to our original question of what do you want to accomplish? What are you an expert at? What are you passionate about? And then if you're really authentic and you put out good quality content, then people will be drawn to that.
Okay, yeah, I see. So basically, can we say that for that podcast, your ideal listener is the female version of you?
Well, it's looking like that's the case, but I've also had a number of comments and correspondence with men as well. I think it's more socially acceptable for women to be, introverted or shy or quiet. The male, the male persona is, to be strong and outgoing and assertive, and that's. So I don't know. So it's been a week, so I'll let you know in a month or two. I don't really care who that podcast. I'm not selling anything. Like, the Intronaut is not a lead gen to it's a course or a book or a service. It's strictly to help people, and I don't know exactly who that's going to be yet, but it could be men and or women. It wouldn't matter to me.
Okay, I see. So basically, there are 2 approaches. Why I asked you this, because there are 2 approaches. There are some people who say you have to create your ideal listener and drift from there and make all the decisions, who to have as a guest, what kind of content to create, where to promote, in order to get those people in and stuff like that, which is the one side of the thing. Mm-hmm. There are some others who are drifting to the other extreme, saying okay, what's going to happen is I'm going to create what I want to create. And then those who will like it will come and gather around that. And then it's, and based on, after a certain period of time, when people gather, you already have some tendencies, you see some things, and that's how your audience is created. So there are 2 completely opposite approaches. Both of them have worked. So there is no right or wrong in there. But which one have you followed?
Well, I think for the Horror Writers Podcast and Dark Arts Theater, I just shared a passion that I knew other people had, especially for Dark Arts Theater, which is heavy metal and horror. There seems to be a convergence there for a number of people. A number of people have those similar interests. They are into heavy metal and they're into horror, and so that's who that podcast is for. So I think from that standpoint, I was like, well, that's what I like, and so that I'm just going to put that out there. And I don't know how long I'll do those. I might do Dark Arts Theater the 2nd season and go, you know what, there's just not a big audience for this, and I might stop doing it. I don't know, but that was something I really liked. The intronaut, I think, was the other way. So I think I've done it both those ways. The intronaut was like, okay, for me, it's like, I know this is a need. I know this is something people are talking about and people are concerned about, and I can bring my own experience to that. And so I did. So I think I kind of hit it from both sides, but I don't know if it's a right or wrong kind of thing. And I think every person will have to make their own decision as to which approach they want to take.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, both, as I said, both worked. I've seen success stories from both sides. So it's not like, there is a right or wrong way to do that.
Right.
I have a feeling that, the second one, like, coming up with what you want and having people gather around you, may be more suitable for the creative type, unorganized type,
Good
and,
point.
that kind of people. While the other one is, it's a bit more like business decision type of thing, which may not suit everyone. And then the other extreme, like, creating what you love and what you're interested in, is more flexible, because you may change that later on. So it's like, it's just me, and whatever I'm doing, whatever I feel like doing at this moment, that's what I will do. So basically it seems like it's more personality related and linked rather than content related.
Right.
Which means that it will work perfectly if your personality is like, charismatic one, because if not, then you're linking to something which is not exactly very competitive in that respect.
Yeah. And that's sort of a bigger branding approach too. Especially for creatives like authors, musicians, you are the brand. And, the brand isn't the book or your cover or your album cover or your song. You are the brand. And a lot of people will enjoy what you have to say and what you produce, regardless of what it is, just because you are the brand. So I know that there are probably, I know for a fact, because some people have told me they've already found the Intronaut and they've went and checked out my books. And that's really cool. That's awesome. That's not my goal, but like, that's great if people do that. And I think that's because I'm the brand, and if they like one product, then they might try another. And it's definitely more sort of for the creatives, I think, than for like, problem solving or services. But I think brand's important.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm very sort of, pay attention on the personality part of it. So if for example, even in service, if I have an option between two services and I know the person who's providing one and I know that he's good and I trust him, most probably, I won't even check the other one. I'll just go with the one I know. So that's, it works pretty much everywhere. Simply the thing with creative people is that their personalities are very kind of crazy and unstable and unique, so you end up having this more unpredictable ride following them, rather than it's not like I don't know, I mean, I think it's more flexible, so you may end up having broader content and more options to look at, rather than the how to non-fiction. I mean, it's even with books like that, right? Non-fiction books are very predictable. The only thing that is not predictable from the cover and the description when you read it is whether it will be good or bad. So the rest is like, what the problem is, was it written for, and what you're getting out of it. So it's sort of, you have the expectations. While with fiction books, all you can get is the genre, but you don't really know what it is about, what you will be getting, what kind of, emotional impact it will have, and, and all that stuff. So it's very, very difficult to position things. And I mean, for me, it's even more difficult because I'm in between the two.
Yes.
I mean, it's still just like introverts and extroverts. I studied business at the university, and all my majors were in corporate finance, stock valuation, and portfolio management. And I dreamed to become a stockbroker in Wall Street. So it's like a completely different thing. And then I ended up realizing that my passion was writing and more creative stuff, and meeting new people and communicating, and things that had nothing to do with finance.
Nice.
So and I love both. And actually, I studied business because I couldn't choose whether I should follow languages or I should follow something like more, So I realized, and I had this stereotype, I was much younger, that, those who are studying, languages, journalism, marketing, and stuff like that, those are the ones whose brain are not, clever enough to do finance. That's why they are doing that. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to prove that, I can do that part too. So I ended up being in between the two. So for me, it's very difficult, because it's like, just because you're in between, you're not extremely good at either of those. So you're sort of bouncing around between the two, and realizing, like, every time your business brain switches on. So you're talking about email marketing, sales funnels, niche audience, and stuff like that. And then you realize, but it's not fun. It's not about me. I'm just going to toss it all away. I'm canceling everything I did, and I'm starting over again, a completely different thing. So it's always difficult. People, it's tough to follow me because I'm not stable. And that itself damages the audience itself, because, you either end up with people who are not stable themselves, so they understand and they are okay with that. Mm-hmm. Or, many people will drop out because they were like, we didn't sign up for this. What's going on? So.
Yeah. Yep. Very true.
Yeah. And since you're doing almost the same thing, but you're adding up podcasts, so the ones you're doing, they still stay. I usually, I cancel projects and then start over again, so I don't really accumulate them and keep up with them so much. So, as I said, I had, even in the corporate career, actually, I was changing not just the jobs, but also the areas completely. Yeah. So it was like, I was accused so many times, but, like in Armenia, people are very conservative, and we're like, you have to study well and then get to university and have a nice job after that, and get married and have kids. And, it's all sort of, predicted and stated, and what people expect from you.
Right.
And changing jobs every 3 to 4 years isn't something that is very nice thing to do, especially if you are bouncing from finance to marketing to telecom and all that stuff. But it's tough to keep a loyal audience in that case. So you do need, after all, to get some limitations to, I don't know. Yep. Because even people who know me on Blab, because I've been here for a while, there are many people who know me but don't know what I'm doing. So, which talks about bad branding, actually.
Always something to work on. So.
Oh yeah, that's true. It's and then you always have this curiosity factor. So they will ask, you will tell, right?
Yep. All right. So we about wrapping up here. We hit all the questions and everything.
It seems no more questions, guys. If you have questions, just type them in. We will address them too. And and I guess this interview was another proof that I'm not very consistent, because podcasting has nothing to do with apart from the fact that I'm doing a podcast, it has nothing to do with my audience. So my audience are not podcasters, neither are they interested in a podcast.
Yeah, no. I don't think mine are either. We'll find out, I guess.
Well, I think for introverts, it can work well, because you're sort of, hiding behind the microphone, and you're sharing your message and communicating, but from the safer space.
Right.
So you don't really have to interact that much, but you also sort of interact, but from, it's kind of, I guess it should work for them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like one level removed from a live conversation. So that seems.
Oh yeah. And then the next level will be dragging them to Blab and making them more visible. Yeah, that's a little bit extreme. I mean, it took me a while, I was podcasting for a whole year, and no one had seen me on video. So I had the same profile picture. I usually don't do selfies, so they didn't see much of my newer pictures anyway. So that's all they have seen. And then on the 1 year anniversary of my podcast was the first time that I did a Google Hangout. And that's when they saw me on video for the first time, because I hated video. So before Blab came out, I've almost never been on video. I still don't like it, but Blab is like, helping me with that, because it's the only platform I can kind of, be okay with being on video. And it's because I'm not talking to a screen, I'm talking to a person.
Right.
If it was like a screen type of thing, like Periscope, then it wouldn't work for me either. It's just, too egocentric for me. So.
Well, thanks for the invite. It was fun to blab with you.
Yeah, it's really nice. We can do it again sometime. This I have a nice plugin. It actually, all this automatically goes to my website.
Nice. So
it's sort of cool. So we'll have it as a substitute to the classic blogging. It will be like a blog post on the podcast, on the website with the video.
Great.
Okay, so